Alrighty. Working glasses. Okay, what's going on, everybody? Today I'm gonna do something a little bit different. Today we're gonna be diving into the Bible, and I kind of just wanted to start doing like maybe like once a week, just like go dive into like one of the stories in the Bible. And at first I wanted to kind of jump around, but I think instead I'd rather just go in like chronological order. So today we're gonna do what I think is a really interesting story, which is the first 7 days, right? God makes the world in 7 days. Uh and so I basically it's just chapter one and like the first two verses of chapter two. Um I am gonna read from the NIV, and then every once in a while I'm just gonna put my input in. Before I get started, though, I'm not like a preacher. I'm not even like a youth pastor. Like I'm not really qualified, in a sense to speak on stuff as if it's like factual. I do believe in Jesus. I do believe in God. So, take what I say with a grain of salt. If you've never, dove into the book and into the Bible, my advice is to just give it a shot. I mean, just give it an honest try. I mean, what's the harm in it? You waste a little bit of time. I think everybody should give it a chance. And if you don't like it, whatever. It is what it is. Yeah, today we're gonna go over the story of the first 7 days here on Earth, and I'm gonna be reading from an NIV. However, I do know that there's some, I guess, criticisms is what you would call it, of the NIV, especially from King James readers, which is fine, whatever. The main thing that I've heard is like they think that stuff has been taken out. I don't know if that's true. One thing I will do, if I see something that I kind of question, I will go over to the King James and I will also read it from there. That way, anybody that reads the King James isn't like, thinking I'm speaking falsely, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, without it out of the way, let's go ahead and get in the video. All right, so I'm just going to be reading like off my phone. You can follow along if you'd like, but go ahead and get started on Genesis chapter 1. So, verse 1 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." I'm not sure what it means by heavens. Like, I know that there's heaven, but you almost speculate that it means like outer space, but there's no real mention of any other heaven outside of where God's throne is. So, I mean, that's what I'm going to go ahead and assume that it is. Verse 2 now, and it says, "Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." 3 says, "And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." I think it's also important to note that God's not, or at least it doesn't seem like he's talking to anybody other than himself. So when he's speaking, he's just speaking to like the matter around him. I don't really know how to explain that, but I mean, it just appears to me that that's what's going on. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. Something I noticed was that God only called the light good. He didn't call the darkness good. That's something that mankind is sort of taking a liking to, which is the darkness, which is, the nightlife, right? Staying up late, staying up all night. Especially like younger people like me, I have a tendency to stay up all night and then sleep all day. And then, you have like, this is more like a big city thing, but they're like, what's the nightlife like, with the clubs and the bars and all that. And then something you notice is there's a lot more evil that goes on in the dark than in the light. And so I just thought it was interesting that God called the light good. He didn't call the darkness good. God called the light day and the darkness night, and there was evening and there was morning the first day. So the first day is complete, and there's some speculation regarding what day means. And what I mean is, like how much time that actually is. Like to us, a day is 24 hours, but there's future verses down the line that talk about God's perception of time compared to ours, and how vast, like how our lives are just like kind of like like a blow in the wind type of thing. So, you know, could God's day refer to, 1,000 years or something longer? So, that's something that people speculate about all the time. And then also on top of that, you have, the scientific community that theorizes that the earth is much older than what, if you took the Bible at face value, what it is. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. God called the vault sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. So this day in specific has been the topic of a lot of debate and theories over the years. My personal thought is that maybe at one point above, like, I guess, like the ozone layer or whatever, that there actually was like water. But also, I think what people kind of fail to remember is that, God, whenever Noah comes around later on, which will be something we'll talk about one day, but God lets that water fall from heaven. That's what floods the earth. And if you notice in in verse in verse 2, he says, "Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters." So the earth was flooded when he started the earth. So to me, it just makes sense that, when the flood came for Noah, that water that he had separated initially, and now it's just, I don't know. That's more of a scientific explanation. Somebody more scientific than myself needs to explain what happened after that. Where'd the water go? But that's just kind of like my personal thought on day 2, anyways. And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let dry ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seeds according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kind. And God saw that it was good. So just back to verse 11 real quick, and I think it's pretty neat that science sort of backs the idea of the order in which God has done all these things so far, right? Like, the first telltale sign that a planet is habitable is that it has water. Well, the first thing that he does is there's water. Another thing is nutrients, which comes from the sun, which comes from light, which is what he made. And then obviously, like, he's about to get into actually making the sun, but he made light. And now he's made land, which is dirt, which produces the carbon dioxide, which is needed later on. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and days and years. And let them be lights in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. First off, I've always thought it was kind of funny that he just kind of it's like a throwaway line when it's like, oh yeah, he also made the stars. But another thing that isn't mentioned is other planets, and there's no mention of, like, our solar system. It doesn't go into great detail regarding outer space, really, which has always been, sort of a big topic, a big point of speculation. I really could not give you a straight answer on what I think it is. I just haven't given it, even when I try to give it thought, I just have no answer for what the planets are, and if they're just, they just could just be there. I don't know. God set them in the vault of the sky to govern the day and the night, and to separate light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the 4th day. And God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. Which, once again, this is more correlation of the Bible and what science tries to tell us, that, we came from fish and birds. And, in the Bible, chronologically, he makes fish and birds first, which I just think is an interesting thought and thing to think about. So God created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing that which the water teems and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the water in the seas, and let the birds increase on earth." And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kind, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. So all the creatures have been made now, and I think it's important to note that there's a difference. There's an actual difference between wild animals and livestock. You'd think when he just made animals, and kind of let humans decide which ones were livestock or not, but he specifically makes livestock and wild animals and creatures that move along the ground, which is something that I just have never really given a lot of thought to, is the fact that there are animals that are more, naturally inclined to be and behave as livestock compared to others. And then there are some that are kind of in between, like how we have domesticated dogs. Where did those come from? Because that's not really livestock. They're more wild animal than livestock. So, it's interesting that maybe some are just from human choice, and then others are just naturally have always been livestock to humans. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the seas and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God says, let us make mankind in our image, which, some speculate that he's talking to himself here. Others speculate that he's actually talking to Jesus, because way later down the line in the New Testament, Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am." So that sort of, gives kind of like an inclination that Jesus was present during this story, the first 7 days of Earth, which makes sense. And I think that may be the case. I think I'm going to go with the fact that Jesus is probably present during this time. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So again, God creates us in his own image. And I think in some type of way that may make us some sort of divine being, because we're created, we derive from divinity itself. We are in the image and likeness of God. But I do think that it's a more literal approach here. I think that it literally just means we look like God. Like we just are literally, our image is what God looks like. And also, I wanted to mention that the final sentence in this verse, verse 27, it was a little peculiar. Try and get that word out. It was a little peculiar. Like I've read Genesis before, but I just really, I guess I sort of skimmed over that part, or didn't really put much thought into it then. But in that moment, I went, wait a minute, are we just skipping over Adam and Eve, or what's going on here? But I looked in the KJV, and it said the same thing. So that led me to kind of speculate. This verse doesn't specify how many people God made. It doesn't specify that he just made man and like 1 and 2. It just specifies that he made man and woman. It does not the specific number of how many he made of each. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So in these verses, God commands mankind, to rule the earth that he has just created. And this appears to be the first sort of command that God ever gives people, which is to rule over everything that has the breath of life in it. God obviously has the forethought to kind of realize that we're not going to be very good at ruling the earth. So, that leads me to believe, no matter how many natural disasters, or not natural disasters, but man-made disasters the earth endures, I believe that the earth was built to last, no matter how, you know, crappy humans can be at times. So, whenever I think about like going to Mars or whatever, I'm not a big fan because I don't think we'll ever need to go to Mars. That I think this earth was built to last for how long God designed it to last, and that's until he comes back. And yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's anything that human beings can do to this earth that is gonna make it. I think we can make it pretty miserable if we tried real hard, but I really just don't believe that humans are gonna be the reason that the earth is destroyed or uninhabitable. Okay, we're on to Genesis chapter 2 now, but we just are gonna do the first two verses here. "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed in all their vast array. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done." So even God takes a break after working hard, which is something that I think a lot of people, kind of using it as an excuse. You may have been thinking for a second, oh, he's going to say, hard workers need to take breaks. Well, a lot more not hard workers need to not use as many excuses that they can pile up, and I'm one of them. So that's why I went that direction with that. And a lot of people deem this as their day of worship. They go to church, it's a holy day, whatever. But I think it's important to note that that we should read and pray and worship every day of the week, so that we're not the seed planted on the rocky ground, like Jesus said in the New Testament. Jesus, he speaks on this parable about a farmer spreads his seed, and some of it goes on some rocky ground, some of it goes on into thorns, and some of it goes onto good soil, and some of it goes onto the path. And when it goes onto the rocky ground, it sprouts up quick, but because it's not deep soil, the sun burns it up. And what that means is that the people on the rocky soil, they hear the word of God and they respond to it in a way that makes them feel good, but it burns out pretty quick. So I know that Sunday is kind of, in Christianity, that's the holy day, that's the day of worship. But I think it's important. Well, I think it's rather more a day of gathering, a day of church, rather than a day of worship. I think that should be a day of community that is built through God, rather than than just the only day to worship. And a lot of people spend only Sundays or maybe Wednesdays even worshiping, and I disagree. But yeah, that is going to do it for the first 7 days of the earth. That was Genesis chapter 1 and verses 1 and 2 of chapter 2. But that's going to do it for today. If any of my 15 subs are watching, that's right, we just hit 15 subs. Thank you for watching. I lack so hard on this channel because I've been working a lot, and my work schedule is just ridiculous. I'm not even going to get there. I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to try and get at least one of these out once a week if I don't do anything else, because these are pretty easy to make and pretty easy to edit. So I'm not too worried about it. Uh, but if you like the video, sub. If you're interested in the Bible, in Christianity, and Jesus and God, hit the sub, hit the like button. Next time we'll be going over Adam and Eve, the story of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. So that should be pretty interesting. I'm pretty excited for that one. It's a good story with a lot of questions to be asked and some to be answered. But yeah, that's gonna do it for me, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.